Hi, everyone. My name is Tori Cooper, and I'm the Director of Community Engagement for the Transgender Justice Initiative at the Human Rights Campaign. And it is indeed my honor to have for you to host and to talk with some of my friends, an amazing group of folks who are going to tell you just a little bit about themselves, about the work that they do, and why they're here today. So I was going to do bios, but I think it's you all are best at telling your own stories. So Naomi, why don't you take about a minute and a half to tell folks about who you are, what you do, where you work, all that other kind of stuff.
Sure, thank you. I am Naomi Green. I am the programs manager here at Abounding Prosperity Incorporated in Dallas, Texas, of our transgender services. I created and run a program for Black and Brown transgender women called Transparency. And it's a very holistic program that really focuses on the entire person instead of single aspects of the person. So we don't just focus on prevention or HIV testing and things of that nature. We have services like hormone replacement, legal name and gender marker changes. We offer rental and utility assistance. Of course, we offer testing, care, treatment, free PEP, things of that nature. So it's really a program that was designed to focus on more than one aspect. We have a leadership development program that focuses on resume building, professional dress, financial literacy. So we really wanted to do something that is going to uplift trans individuals, trans women to be specifically, and then also just to make sure that once they leave this program, they're leaving with something that can help them throughout their everyday lives and help get them a little bit more established in life as well. I've been doing it about 2 years, but I started my advocacy about 15 years ago. Prior to getting into the work professionally, I was doing it personally.
How absolutely wonderful for what you all are doing at AP. Shout out to Kirk. And you all, if I'm not mistaken, maybe it's public. Aren't you all opening up another center or?
We actually recently did open up yes. The Hope Health Center is the Helping Our People Equally Health Center. Is really one of the first of its kind in the nation. Started by a Black-owned agency here in the South. And, we do offer a ton of different services in that facility. Most of our testing and things like that are done here in the community center where I am, but we have a separate building that focuses on PrEP, PEP, hormone replacement therapy. We have a transgender Transparency Transgender Health Service Center as well at Hope, and that's actually here in this building. So we have a standalone separate clinic also for trans women that's separate from our standalone clinic. So it's really exciting. It's an exciting time. We're growing exponentially. So it's really good to be here at AP and also be involved in this work.
Awesome. And chatting too is pretty cool too. I've attended myself. Awesome. And tell us your pronouns.
She, her, and hers.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Naomi. It's a pleasure to have you. And we're going to talk more for the next 55 minutes. So next on my screen is Queen Hatcher Johnson. So Queen, tell everybody who you are, what you do, where you do it, all that other good stuff, and your pronouns.
I am Queen Hatcher-Johnson in Atlanta, Georgia. I do not use pronouns. No pronouns, please. I am employed at Positive Impact Health Centers where I'm a prevention specialist. I also recently formatted a program for people of trans experience, the whole spectrum, the whole umbrella. You didn't have to have an age criteria. You didn't have to have a status criteria. You didn't have to have anything. So I removed what I considered to be barriers for people to get resources that they need. And the resource that I wanted to provide was for people to further their education. So with the program, they're able to obtain cosmetology certification, barber certification, nail tech certification, or esthetician. Any one of those programs that they choose with full tuition, books, kits, everything that's needed for them to be successful would be provided. The only thing that they would be responsible for is showing up, attendance, and hopefully successfully completing the program. It's been challenging, but I do believe that with the next cohort, or even with this one, we will do. We're doing the community a service, so hopefully people will take advantage of it. So that's it here in Atlanta.
How absolutely wonderful. And yes, you are doing a community a service. You're doing a service because we know, as much as many of us would like to not think so, credentials matter. They matter to some folks more than they do others, but they do matter. And anytime we're offering an opportunity for trans folks all across the spectrum to be certified and attain certifiable skills, that's economic empowerment, and that's absolutely wonderful. So thank you for what you're doing at Positive Impact Health Centers, and thank you just for being you. And hopefully at some point during our next 50 minutes, you'll tell us a little bit more about no pronouns and what that means to you. All right. Thank you so much. Last but certainly not least, Derek Baugh. Tell us who you are, what you do, where you do it, and how you do it.
Well, so good evening, everyone, because it's evening right now, right? My name is Derek. My pronouns are he, him, and his, but I'm open to all things respectfully. I am the co-founder and CEO / executive director at Ubuntu Incorporated, where we work to provide services to transgender people, but more specifically transgender men, as well as the spouses of those transgender men. Some of the things we do include supportive things like groups, peer counseling, patient advocacy. This year, we're venturing more so into direct services. So you'll see more from us soon. Some mutual aid and different things like that we have coming up. But outside of Ubuntu, I also volunteer in the community at several organizations. I play different roles. I'm also a consultant, and my work is based here out of Atlanta. Actually, I was introduced to advocacy through the HOP. Yeah, I know. Shout out to the HOP. Can't wait for it to come back. And it's just been up from here. So that was kind of a little, but hey.
Well, awesome. And for those who don't know, the HOP is the Hour of Power. HOP stands for Hour of Power, which was created, in full disclosure, by me when I used to work with Queen over at Positive Impact Health Centers. See, we're all a one big family, and we're all connected in so many ways. So this is wonderful. So everybody take a deep breath. I don't want any of you to be nervous, and I can sense through these airwaves that some of you are. So we're going to center ourselves, because what we are doing, using Queen's words, we are providing a service, and we are providing an opportunity for folks to learn more about our experience, and ours being the four of us, but also members of our community as well. All right. So this is going to be fantastic, and we're right on schedule because I'm watching my clock. So let's get right into it. So our session title today is for the CONVERGE Summit. Our session is called Can You See Me? How healthcare systems and providers not seeing trans and non-binary people, and how is it failing us? So we're going to take just a couple of minutes, and I'd like to start with Queen specifically to talk a little bit about invisibility in healthcare systems, how healthcare systems are failing us, and what we can do about it. So let's take maybe about 90 seconds for each of your answers, and then we'll kind of shift back and forth, because I have a few questions that I really want folks to hear.
So invisibility in healthcare, the number one thing that comes to my mind is we're going to be invisible in healthcare if society doesn't place laws into action to protect us as Black trans women, because we're losing our lives. We're being murdered at phenomenal rates. So we're not going to be visible because we're not going to be here if we don't have some form of protection. And if you want to go deeper, invisibility in healthcare, meaning that I think they have an idea of what trans masculine, trans feminine, or gender non-binary may look like for each person. And I think that they use that pattern just to box us all into one box. Everybody doesn't want surgery. Everybody doesn't want HRT. Everyone can't take HRT. Everybody, we all look different. I can't remember the terminology right now, and I don't want to mess up the word, but we are not all the same person. We're not the same people. We're individuals.
A monolith. We are not a monolith.
I botch up that word each time. Thank you. So I think that's where the healthcare system is failing us. And then once they get us in the doors, they do not know how to necessarily interact with us, no matter what level of training we give them, So I just believe that we need to be more visible in the workplace that's providing the service. That's number one. That will create visibility. And I'm going to silence myself.
That's great. And we don't want you to silence yourself. We just want to share space with everyone. And I want to hear a little bit from Derek to talk about trans masculine folks and folks who are masculine of center. How are healthcare services? How are healthcare systems? How are healthcare providers failing us?
So I had to get my little sticky notepad because when Queen was talking, I was like, let me make sure I jot down some notes. And one of the things that I heard Queen speak on is the kind of like the overall experience. And the experience starts when I pick up my phone to make my appointment. Because I was going to say it starts when you walk through the door, but it starts when you pick up the phone to make your appointment. And when I, as a trans man, pick up the phone to make an appointment with my gynecologist because I need to be seen, and they don't know what to do with me, it's a problem. Because you don't know how to interact with trans people, how to make them feel welcome, how to make them feel safe in a space. I think that a lot of times too easily we are like, oh, this person's trans friendly. They have their pronouns in their email. But number one, I don't need you to be trans friendly. I need you to be trans competent. I need you to know about my body and what these hormones are doing to my body, or the lack of hormones. I need you to be knowledgeable. I don't need another friend. Number one. Number two, pronouns in your email is not enough to make me feel safe. So I think that that's a great start. But I think we have to go further than that. And I think we as trans people have to be demanding. And I think we have to call on people who are our allies and accomplices to stand in that gap between us and providers to diminish that invisibility complex that does exist for trans people as a whole when it comes to healthcare. Because a lot of times I don't think people are malicious. It's just like, I don't know. I've never served a trans person, or maybe they have and they don't know because that trans person is misgendered. Or as we know with like HIV data, a lot of times when the data is disseminated, trans women are misgendered, trans men are misgendered, and it just goes crazy. So I hope that answers the question.
Well, I think it was a great answer to the question. And I'm going to bounce off of you two for another couple of minutes with this particular question, because quite often, since CONVERGE Summit is about HIV, and we very seldom hear really impactful data on trans women. And if we hear anything, then we hear even less about trans masculine folks. Tell us why that is. You hinted at it a little when you said that we're often misgendered, but what are some of the problems that providers are facing? And what are some of the challenges that trans masculine folks and folks masculine of center face, particularly as it pertains to HIV healthcare settings?
I think I know personally, some of the challenges that we face are lack of access to things like PEP and PrEP. And that lack of access is due to a lack of education. And it's really easy to say, oh, well, we're not sitting at the table. That's true, but we're not sitting there because we don't know that there's a table. And a lot of that is due to a lack of funding to organizations who are doing the work in the communities that are the most impacted, but they're not funded. So they don't know how to get the word out. And so there's a lot of missed opportunity in that regard. But also when it comes to providers, me sitting on your table is not the time for you to ask me a bunch of very invasive questions about different things. And like, sure, gigs have come from that, but it also makes it really traumatic to go to the doctor. And if I don't go to the doctor and I'm not only getting my hormone levels checked, but I might not get my HIV meds. I might not get my PEP. I might not get my PrEP, those types of things. So it's those traumatic experiences at the doctor's office because the community organizations are not being funded or don't have the access to the education, the information that they need to provide. I think that's a lot of the missed opportunities of why trans masculine people or people who are masculine of center are left out of these conversations, are not provided with access to these things.
That's wonderful. And so, Queen, this part is for you. So, based on what I heard from Darren, what if I gave you all of the money in the world that you needed for HIV care, but I still misgendered folks? Does that mean folks like you who doesn't use pronouns, folks like me who identify as binary trans women, and other folks would still be facing any problems? Would it be then the Wakanda of healthcare for us?
So no, it would not be the Wakanda of healthcare for us, because all of the money in the world would only do what it has done for decades, create a Band-Aid. We are Band-Aiding things that actually need to be healed. Misgendering people, that is very traumatic. That, like Derek said, it starts over the phone. So over the phone, because I might sound more masculine, I always get yes, sir. For someone who is not as knowledgeable or comfortable within their transition, that to them that's a door that's closed. For me, I just correct them and move on because I see the greater need for within myself, that I need to get this. But no, so misgendering someone, it starts with the phone call. Then it starts once you go inside, the forms that you have to fill out that don't have a space for trans masculine, trans feminine, gender non-binary. So you have to put yourself in one of these binary categories, either male or female. That is it. And then now they've come up with this new thing, your gender assigned at birth. So all of these things that they're thinking, and they're not listening to the community, because if you listen to the community, they're telling you exactly how to holistically fix this and stop band-aiding it.
Thank you. Because Band-Aids are great in the sense that they provide a little relief for a very short amount of time. But what happens is you have to take that Band-Aid off to let your wound get some air in order for a scab to come over it and in order for the new skin to get there. So thank you for using that reference, because Band-Aids, they serve a purpose, but it's a very temporary purpose. It is not a long-lasting purpose. Plus, Band-Aids don't come in all shades, just like these same solutions that they have. So if you have brown skin like the four of us do, traditional Band-Aids don't work. All right, that was a little racial stuff. I just felt like adding that in. But let me come to Naomi, because I want to talk a little bit more about that. We are Black people, and that is certainly by no means, it does not go without citing that we were intentional about incorporating Black and brown people into this conversation. And with that being said, Black trans women, based on information that was presented through this summit today, Black trans women are at least 30% more likely to be diagnosed with HIV. Naomi, your work is centered in Dallas, Texas, and in the greater Dallas, Texas area. Most of us, all of us, do a lot of work in the South, but also across the country. So we know that there are some places in the South where those rates are far higher. But based on the information from this subject, from this summit, so what are some of the reasons why Black trans women in particular, followed closely by Latinx trans women, have such high rates of HIV diagnosis? And what are some positive steps in the right direction that are taking place now? And I'm going to ask this question specifically of Naomi and then of Queen.
I think first and foremost, a lot of it boils down to stigma. There is a lot more stigma that I have noticed since living in the South compared to areas further up north. And it trickles into our healthcare systems. It trickles into our community-based organizations. It trickles into employment. It trickles into the family, into all of those different things. And where there's stigma, there's discrimination. And when you deal with lots of stigma, you deal with lots of discrimination, you're going to deal with a lot of different issues that are specifically going to hurt Black and brown trans women, especially Black trans women. Homelessness, social isolation, employment discrimination, all of those things force transgender women typically into survival work, sex work. And with that, comes, I have to do what I have to do to survive. And, sometimes that may be doing things that you don't want to do, that you don't agree with, and all those things. But survival is at the top of your list. And sometimes that means putting your health and your life in danger. Unfortunately, and many of my trans sisters end up in those situations where, they have to do whatever they need to do just to make sure that they are able to maintain life. So you come out to your parents, you're dealing with stigma and discrimination, you're put out of the home, you don't have family to turn to, so you have to turn to this type of work. You don't have access to a lot of social services and other supportive services that are going to help Black transgender women because of discrimination and stigma. You're not able to get a job, to maintain that living. And then you have a lot of people who don't have access to, the healthcare that they need, like PrEP and PEP and some of those other services. And because you're dealing with stigma and discrimination, you're not going to the doctor's office and some of these places to get the care and prevention that you may need. And so it does lead to increased rates of HIV.
Phenomenal response. I wrote some notes down that I want to check to you all, but talk a little bit about that for us, Queen, please.
So, to piggyback off of what Naomi said, I think it starts, stigma is a big part, but it starts with a great deal of self-worth and self-value, because we've been devalued from the beginning, because I want to say 7 out of 10 times, Black trans women, people of color of trans experience, the very first thing that happens is when you come to be your authentic self is your family either ostracize you, or they feel as if though they have to demonize you. So both of those things add a layer of trauma to you. And then after they've added this layer of trauma to you, and then they ostracize you, now you're thrown to the wolves. And unfortunately, like Naomi said, there are no resources for Black trans women, young Black trans women, or even, it doesn't even matter about the age, because if you take into consideration, no matter when you transition, if you start HRT at 30, you're technically dealing with someone who is about 20 some years old, because they're going backwards to their puberty days. So I just think that it really starts with, we need to empower and give people self-value, self-worth, and refocus this whole HIV thing. And then during that time when we're refocusing, encourage people, educate people, make them more knowledgeable about PrEP and healthier ways of having sex. Because sex work, survival sex work, is exactly what it is. It's survival. So however that might look, we can empower people to do what they feel they need to do, but give them healthier ways of doing it.
Very good. See, that's why you all are here. Because some folks are going to say, well, why you don't have any Spanish-speaking people up there? Well, first of all, they don't know if any of you speak Spanish, number one. And we were very intentional about creating diversity, even though all of us have brown skin. And that all three of you as panelists have very distinctly different gender identities. And so no matter what your racial background is, we thought it was important to really add that, because, that's really important. And we're going to talk more about PrEP and PEP and TASP, which is one of my favorite things to talk about also a little further on. But I was thinking about kind of an experiment in my head that really ties in what you two have said. And what I heard was the red dot of stigma. I believe I heard you say that, Naomi. That's what I wrote down, so I must have heard it, even if it was one of the voices in my head. And I thought of a water bottle. A water bottle is clear and it's, whatever color it is or the lack of color. But if you add one dot of something, suddenly the color is less clear. But then if you add 2 dots of it, it becomes something else. So if you add 1 dot, let's say, we'll call these our social determinants of health. So let's say you add 1 dot of race into the mix. You can barely see that change difference if it's only race, but then you add a 2nd dot of socioeconomic status or perceived socioeconomic status, because you don't really know my background or my credit score unless I provide you with my social security number. You just assume you know it. And a 3rd drop might be that transactional sex work piece. That's a way to sum up those who are engaged in survival sex and those who are engaged in get ahead sex, because those could be 2 different things. And then maybe even add in the language, the red dot, the stigma around English not being your first language, because for some reason we often forget that everybody who came here from another country, Spanish wasn't their first language. A lot of folks came here speaking Russian and speaking French and Japanese, and they're trans people from those communities as well. So that could be yet another dot. And then add in transphobia and add in devaluation, which I heard Queen said. And suddenly that clear bottle of water, as you continue to add 1 additional dot of red dot of stigma, it becomes discolored. And you don't even want to drink it. And that's kind of how the healthcare system works. And that's how stigma works in itself. So thank you all for contributing to this conversation. I love the way that you said that. So pushing ahead, and this next question is for Derek and then for Naomi. I really want to talk a bit more about transmasculine folks. So trans men and folks who are masculine of center have specific needs in terms of healthcare and HIV care and HIV prevention. So tell us a little bit about some of the challenges. You've hit on a few of those, but maybe we talk a little bit about reproductive justice, but you're one of the experts there. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Okay. So one of the barriers I feel like is language. Largely, Queen speaks specifically to pronouns. As a binary trans man, my pronouns are very important to me. I fought for them. I want them. And I want you to understand, when I'm filling out your form at the doctor's office, they're not preferred, they're required. And something even better to put on the form to me would just be like, how would you like to be addressed? Instead of like the pronouns trying to, like, that just, to me, that just covers a multitude, and I don't understand why it's not that way. And I said this earlier, but I feel like I need to say it again and again. If people who are in larger seats at larger tables doing HIV work, the people who control the funding and the powers that maybe whatever, if you want a solution, you have to look to community. You have to talk to the community, like not just have a focus group and then give them a slice of pizza and a $25 gift card. These organizations need to get these $1 million grants, and then we can start working in silos and dealing with the scarcity mindset and competing with each other and collaborate and do some really impactful work. So the solution looks like community. And going back to language, I would say nobody wants to be a risk factor. Be a risk factor. So why are we not having conversations about having the best sex possible, or things that lead to contracting HIV instead of risk factors or things that put you at risk? Because if you are having, and Devin Barrington Ward said this, if you are having a conversation about sex, the best sex possible, safety is already a part of that conversation. Prevention is already a part of that conversation. So, and also to put it towards trans men, part of that conversation about the best sex ever is reproductive justice. So have you, thought about if you would like to have a child, if you don't want to have a child, here's your options. Do you want to carry the child? For years, I didn't know that egg retrieval was an option. I didn't know that until I went to a conference and somebody told me that. So we don't even know our options a lot of times. Nobody's having these conversations. And so I've made it one of our pillars at Ubuntu to have these necessary conversations about reproductive justice, about tasks, about language, about like we'll go to the doctor with you, whatever it is that you need. And I think there are a lot of other community organizations willing to do the same things, but maybe don't have access to the resources of the funding.
Amazing. And in that same vein, certainly I want you to talk about transmasculine folks from an outsider's point of view, Naomi, and then from the role of a provider of services as well. And then kind of venture into the things that may be similar in the needs of transmasculine, transfeminine folks, and then the things that are exclusive to trans women that healthcare providers just aren't getting.
So for me, I think that Derek really hinted around a lot of it, but just didn't come out and blatantly say it. Is I think that a lot of it boils down to training and options for training. I don't think that it needs to be an option for healthcare providers, for doctors and nurses and things like that to have an elective or a course that they take on HIV or on trans. About HIV care and different things like that. I think that it should be a requirement when you go through school to be a nurse, to be a CNA, to be an LPN, to be, an RN, any of these things. I think that it should be required for you to have to go through training about what it means to be trans men, trans women, non-binary, all of those things, because all too often these people that sit in these positions are privileged and they're assisting or helping or serving people who lack privilege. And if you come from a place of privilege, it's hard for you sometimes to realize that you have it. And furthermore, also to realize maybe when someone else doesn't, and how to interact with them. And I think that part of the uncomfortability, that you may experience going to the doctor's office and things like that is because these people have not been properly trained, or they may have been given the option and declined the option, but they still have that degree and are interacting with people who may be of trans experience. So I think that really it starts with the education, the health boards and whoever makes these decisions to make sure that these people are trained. And I think it goes back to the very first question that you asked about being invisible and how the healthcare system is failing us with that invisibility. And that to me is one of the reasons why we're invisible in the trainings. And then also on PrEP and PEP, I have a very close friend of mine who went through nursing school and for years. And I was having a conversation with her about U equals U. And she literally didn't believe it, had no clue that it was a thing, that it existed, and he starts talking about PrEP and things like that. And didn't know that that was an option that was available, though I know that they know about PEP because that's something that has been around in doctors' offices and things like that in case they get pricked by needles and stuff like that for years, but didn't know, that in PEP was available in PrEP and different things like that. So I think that it really starts with a lot of the training that goes into these individuals, because the first thing that popped in my mind is how can you be an individual in healthcare, a nurse or RN or whatever, and you don't know about some of the latest information and latest, medicine and things like that. And, for me, that's scary, going to doctor's offices and they have the option to talk to you about things that could save your life, and not having those conversations because they don't have the information. They may have been given the option to take the training, or, it was their option of whether or not they wanted to offer it to you or offer it at their practice. And you have people walking around, who have no idea that things that could save their life or have an impact on their life even exist, because people are not trained or they're given the option of whether or not they want to offer it or have conversations about it. And I think that that is very important, to start focusing in on. That's what leads to some of the misgendering, to the lack of using people's pronouns or going by what they want to be called by, who they are. And, some of the language that we see on these forms, or a lack of language that we see on these different forms. for trans masculine men, it's very important to have those conversations again about, reproductive organs, having those conversations, like Derek mentioned, do you want to still have children? Do you want to carry the child? And those are very similar also with trans women. Many trans women don't know that when you start taking hormones, you are medically castrated after some time, and that you're no longer going to be able to have children of your own because it makes you sterile. A lot of people don't have that information because providers are not having those conversations with people, prior to getting them more hormones or, starting their hormones or whatever. So I think that there are definitely a lot of similarities when it comes to that. And then with trans women, specifically having those conversations, about reproductive organs, but then also taking it a step further, knowing how to have conversations with people as well. When you go into a doctor's office and they ask you, when's your last period? And you say, oh, I've not had one. Oh, well, when's the last time? I've never had one. And they just don't know the next step to take or the next question to ask. And you kind of sometimes have to come out and tell them instead of them naturally having a conversation and asking, well, why is it? Is there something going on? Are you trans? That doesn't even come in their minds a lot of the time. And you have to have that conversation with them, which can kind of make it uncomfortable. And if it's an office where they don't see very many trans people, you can kind of feel the difference of the energy, sometimes. And so that can be very uncomfortable and stigmatizing, and so there's just a lot of different things to me that boil down to training that I feel that we shouldn't have to deal with if a lot of these providers got better training.
That's good. That's amazing. And I agree with so much of that. And I see the other panelists shaking their heads and nodding their heads and yes, girl, and all that other kind of stuff. And since we've mentioned it several times, let's talk a little bit more about prep services, and then also talk about TASP. TASP is an acronym that stands for Treatment as Prevention. I heard someone say U equals U. I think I heard it, or again, that might have been that voice in my head. But it's important to talk about that, because if we're going to talk about the best sex that people with HIV can have, then we have to talk about treatment as prevention. We have to talk about U equals U and talk about why that's so important. So Naomi, tell us a little bit about what that looks like in the Metro Dallas area, what it looks like for getting trans people, and more specifically trans women, on HIV medications to take their medications. And looking at Gardner's Cascade of Care, we would say to have trans women retained into care, and then to achieve viral suppression, to use more formal terminology. So tell us a little bit about what it takes to do that in Dallas, why so many trans women are still falling through the cracks. And then I want to go to Queen, who's in Atlanta, who can give us a similar background information on a same community in a different area.
So PrEP, or pre-exposure prophylaxis, is a once-a-day pill that you are able to take that dramatically reduces your chances or risk of contracting HIV. And it is very, 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 very useful and helpful in ending the epidemic, along with PEP, and U equals U, or treatment as prevention as well. One of the things that we have done here at our agency is, first of all, speaking with the community, and really finding out why people are not on PrEP, or why people are not talking about prevention a lot more. One of the things that I heard and found, and it threw me for a loop at first, and then once it was explained to me, it made sense, was, well, what are the benefits of being negative? And so I had to think about that. Well, the benefits of being negative is being negative, like it didn't make sense to me. But then once people started to break it down and said to me, well, if you're a person living with HIV, you can get free healthcare. You can get free hormone replacement therapy. You can get assistance with housing or get housing. You're able to get dental assistance. You know, you can get food stamps, all these different resources that you're able to get if you're a person living with HIV. And then you look at a population of marginalized people like trans women and Black trans women specifically, who lack a lot of those resources, who don't have access to healthcare, who, you know, don't always have housing, you know, or rental assistance, you know, who don't get HRT assistance and things like that. And so if I'm with my girlfriend and, you know, I'm a person living without HIV and my girlfriend is a person living with HIV, and I'm seeing all the things that she has to help her out and helping her through her transition and helping her survive, and I'm sitting here looking like, well, where is my help? You know, and the only difference between her and I is our seroconversion status. You know, it makes a person wonder, well, what is the benefit of being negative? You know, and it made so much sense to me. And so kind of thinking along those lines and taking that into account, we have kind of tied some of our services and program into sexual health and into prevention. So we offer HRT services or hormone replacement therapy. But in order for you to be eligible for HRT, you either need to come and get tested and based on your status, get on PrEP, or you need to come and get tested and based on your status, you need to get into care and treatment. But one of those two options. And with doing one of those two options, we will allow you to get on free HRT. Now, of course, that is limited because of funding. And so we can't just give everyone, you know, free PrEP and, you know, HRT and things like that. But we've been very successful in getting trans women into PrEP and also into care. I mean, we had maybe out of 24 individuals that we were able to, you know, do this with, like 19 were able to get, you know, onto PrEP, and none of them seroconverted, you know, during that time, you know, because that is how important HRT is to individuals who are trans, well, to some individuals who are trans, because like Queen said, not everyone can get or wants to get on HRT, but for those who do, that's very important. And there are some people who would rather stop taking their, you know, HIV meds before they stop taking their hormones. If I have to choose between the two, because it becomes a battle of, well, am I going to continue to live and be who I am, or am I just going to not be here? And for some people, that's already a decision that they've had to make anyway. Either I'm going to transition and do this, or I'm just not going to be here and I'm going to take myself out. And that's a very real reality for some people, which is why the suicide rates in the trans community are high, because people have to deal with that stigma and discrimination. And some people are afraid to. And so they would rather just end it than, you know, have the courage to be able to transition, because they don't feel like that is an option, because stigma is that bad. And so just kind of partnering some of those different things, like the legal name and gender changes is something that has been very sought after. So getting those services and things like that tied into some of those other services kind of starts to get trans women into looking at the benefits of being negative and also taking care of themselves as far as their health and things like that. Because when you're already wondering, where am I going to sleep tonight? How am I going to eat? You know, all these different things. Sometimes your health is kind of at the back of your mind, and you really have to kind of focus on those other things first. So when you're able to provide housing or HRT, you know, food, you know, things like that, that people have to worry about every day now, then you can kind of start to get them to think about things like HIV and taking a pill every day and, you know, some of those different things. And so that's what's really been very successful with us. And then also just getting the information out there. I think that we really need to shy away from making PrEP something that is attached to the LGBTQIA community. It should be something that we talk about almost like we do women with birth control. You know, it's empowering people to be able to take control of their own lives. And it's a once-a-day pill that you're able to take. And having those conversations with heterosexual cisgender men, you know, heterosexual cisgender women, and some of those other groups outside of, Black gay men and Black transgender women, I think will also lower the stigma of PrEP, and it will get other healthcare providers to talking about it and other communities to start talking about it, so that trans women can feel more comfortable, talking about it, having those conversations, taking it, and then also feel more comfortable in communities having conversations amongst other people, and healthcare providers are able to start talking about it a lot more freely as well.
Amazing. Mic drop. That was a mic drop moment. And I want to, before Queen talks, I really want to add this. I really feel like I need to say this. The trans people aren't asking for handouts.
No.
Folks will think because you just said, well, trans people want to get housing and trans people, we're not asking for handouts. What we're simply doing is asking for equitable treatment by all healthcare settings. And that I also wrote this note down based on what all of you had just said, but specifically about what you just said, that we have to stop using HIV diagnosis as a Band-Aid. That ties back into what everybody just said. Because if you're a trans person and don't have HIV, then there are even fewer resources for you. And that's got to change. Because if you haven't, let's say that you're a trans person, as I navigate to Queen, and you have an HIV diagnosis, but you're homeless, you need your medicine, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All right, you still need a job. So just because you have an HIV diagnosis, we know that the HOPWA system is screwed up in Atlanta. And the city of Atlanta is months behind on paying folks. So we have to really make sure that we work more closely with that and fix that system. But that doesn't change the factors that put you into homelessness in the first place. It doesn't change the fact that you still need a job. It doesn't change the fact, because there was a time, I'm 50 years old, and there was a time when a person got an HIV diagnosis and they got a disability check within 3 to 4 months, or at least at the most 6 months, because you weren't going to live to see 12 months.
And you know what? We are asking for a handout. Hand us out a job.
How about that?
Stop discriminating against us. Hand us out a job. Hand us a fair chance, at a job or employment, or when we fill out a housing application. Hand us a fair chance at getting that apartment instead of automatically pushing it to the side because you notice that we are trans people. Hand us out some of those fair chances that our counterparts who are cisgender and heterosexual are able to get, that we don't get just because we're trans.
How about that? That was good. Somebody just texted me and they said Naomi that this lady knows her stuff. But they use another word for stuff that I like to use when I'm not on the clock. But Queen, tell us a little bit about, because we're at about 10 more minutes. And I'd like for you to say, and I want to leave the majority of our time for a question that I'm going to pose to all of you. But in just a short amount of time, tell us a little bit about what, expand a little on what Naomi just said, and tell us how are things in Atlanta. We know HOPWA sucks.
Yeah. I have to start with, I like the training part, but we have to make sure that the people that are training these doctors, nurses, are trans people of trans experience. They have to make it equitable for these people to stay in these positions to train. That, and beyond a shadow of a doubt, they have to make it equitable. So, I lost my train of thought because I get passionate.
That's good though. That's good. That's another mic drop moment. It has to be equitable. And I think that's what we all are saying.
Yes. Oh my gosh, what are we talking about?
Well, how about we transition word into intentional word into the last question, and I'll give you a little bit more time to talk about that. So one more thing first. So I have to pull a plug. I'm still on the clock. Plus, I'm really proud of what we're doing at HRC. We're making some strides to change the trajectory that HRC has been historically known for. That's a really politically correct way of saying that our priority is now the entirety of of all LGBTQIA++ folks, with a special emphasis on Black and brown trans people and non-binary people. So I want to make sure I say that. And so it took us 40 years to get to this spot, so it's not going to change overnight. But it's important to understand that we are being very, very intentional about including voices, spaces, and faces and stories that are like ours and many, many others that have historically not been part of the conversation. All right. So with that being said, I am super, super thrilled to announce that the Trans Justice Initiative, that we've been funded through Gilead Sciences for our work with the Trans Justice Initiative. And I'm reading some of this because I want to make sure, yeah, that is worth a clap. And I want to make sure that I say it properly because I don't want anybody sending me any more death threats. So we're really, really excited about that. And our additional program is really focused on HIV. You'll see a big HIV and health equity focus in the work that we're doing from now on. I don't mean just this contract year. I don't mean the 2 years of this grant cycle. I mean from now on, because it's impossible to talk about trans and non-binary folks, particularly race, when you bring race into the picture, and not talk about HIV, because the numbers are incredibly disparate. So HRC and the Trans Justice Initiative, we're committed to providing more public education, to working more closely with our community partners, to provide greater access to HIV prevention and treatment, including PrEP and PEP, and to increase the capacity of BIPOC, that's Black, Indigenous people of color, Black and Indigenous people of color, trans and non-binary leaders. So very quickly, Derek, tell me, what do folks watching need to know about this work in Black and Brown communities?
When you say this work, are you speaking specifically to HIV and how it affects the trans community? Are you speaking to like the larger? Well, very quickly, because that's what we've been talking about the last few minutes, I want to throw this in there. And y'all have already said it, but I feel like it needs to be said again. I cannot begin to think about such and such program getting into care, this, that, and the third, if my needs aren't met. I can't think about those things. I can't think about getting my HIV meds if my needs aren't met. I can't think about getting my HIV meds if I hadn't eaten today. I may be more inclined to those situations of exploitation where someone doesn't want to use a condom, or they tell me like, hey, you can sleep here if you do this thing. Needing makes you so vulnerable. So we have to empower people. We have to empower community. And that is done through economic opportunity. That is done through funding community-based organizations who do the work, who have the clients, who are involved with people, who have boots on the ground and are very involved with this work. So not only hire trans people, but pick out a Black trans organization, honey, and donate every month. Ubuntu, okay? Look to community for a solution. Look to community for the solution, because we are the solution, like us ourselves as like Black trans leaders, but the people that we serve, the solution lies within them. So we have to look within them. We have to bring them to the table. We have to give up our seat at the table. A lot of times people say, bring them to the table, bring them to the table. But sometimes bringing me to the table might mean you have to give up your seat. And I need you to give up your seat. If you're an ally, if you're an accomplice, I need you to give up that seat so that I can sit down and my needs can be met. I think that's what people need to know and what people need to hear.
And boots on the ground in a community. I love analogies and painting colorful stories for people. Sometimes boots on the ground is a beautiful Timberland boot representing transmasculine folks. And sometimes it might be a Doc Martin, which really is not a gendered boot, which could be non-binary folks. Sometimes that's your community base that you're working with. And then sometimes it is a beautiful stiletto made out of pure lamb wool, pure vegan leather. That's what I wanted to say. I know, right? It could be that. Representing trans feminine communities, there are all kinds of folks, and there are boots in between. So whatever community is that you need to work in, equity says that you're putting the attention on folks who need, the ones who need the most are getting the most. So that's important. So in our last about 7 minutes, I'd love for us to really talk about intersectionality. And we've talked about it in various ways so far, but I specifically want each of us to talk about intersectionality. And this is how we're going to do it, all right? So I'm going to give you a sentence. I want you to fill it in, okay? And then talk about that and people who are like you and people who are unlike you. That's a lot, okay? So here's how I want to do it. Queen, since your eyes got bigger, I'm going to start with one of the others and let you think a little bit longer on this. So, Naomi, finish this sentence. And this is also an action step for folks who are watching, okay? My name is Naomi, and I want you to blank and blank.
My name is Naomi, and I am a Black, educated, transgender woman. And I want you to open your heart and mind and help stop discrimination and stigma so that we can end trans violence and the HIV epidemic.
Ooh, powerful. Thank you. Thank you. You ready, Queen?
Go to Derek.
Okay.
Write my notes.
Derek, let's see. I know we saw you and we heard you. Come on, Derek, let's go with it.
Okay, starting.
Okay, I am Derek Ball, and I am
a son, a nephew, an uncle, a friend, a community leader, a servant.
And I want you to blank and blank.
And I want you to listen to Black trans people. I want you to invite Black trans people to the table. I want you to give up your seat at the table. I want you to empower Black trans people to create opportunities for people. Because I think it's just like giving to Black women. If you give anything to a Black woman, she's going to take it back to her community and make it greater. If you give to Black trans people, we're going to pour it into our community and make all communities greater. So I want you to give to Black trans people.
Let me tell you, if I had on pants and shoes, I would have thrown them across the room. That was phenomenal. ... Thank you. As all of your answers are, all of your responses are, that was phenomenal. So, Queen,
I'm ready.
I am Queen Hatcher-Johnson, and I am ... I
am Queen Hatcher-Johnson. I am a Black woman who benefits from my trans identity, and I want to bring on other Black trans people who can also benefit from their trans identity. Not only benefit, but empower others and educate others and keep the baton passing on and on until we normalize being human. Because the hell with being trans. Can we just be human? Can we see each other as human? I think when we start seeing each other as human, then we start really peeling back the layers and removing stigma and discrimination and all of these other things that we've packed on over the years. And as Derek said, listen to the community. Not only listen, I want the community to hold these people that are listening accountable for what's being said and what the needs are.
Woo, that was worth the wait. So I want to thank, that was absolutely powerful. Folks will be blessed by this. I want each of you to give yourselves a hand clap because you won't be able to hear on this streaming app other folks cheering and cursing in their approval. But thank you all so very, very much. I appreciate you. And as we close out, I want all of us to, regardless as to your gender identity and your lot in life, to really just take a moment and reflect on the fact that yesterday, because today is Tuesday, that we recorded our 500,000th death from COVID. And some of those folks were Black trans people as well. All right. So thank you all for being here. Thank you all for joining us. Enjoy the summit.
Ooh.